Fanta, a drink enjoyed by millions every day that actually has a very interesting origin. In this video, we are going back to Second World War to see how it ended up creating one of the most iconic beverages in the world. The year in 1933, and while the Hitler had just come to power, another force was also rising in Germany. Coca-Cola, one of the quintessential American companies, had entered the German market in 1929. On the back of this guy Max Kett, he had single-handedly built the company's entire infrastructure in Germany, starting with the bottling plant in Frankfurt and warehouses in Cologne. He had an army of salesmen who would scour the streets of every major city, pamphlets and putting up posters until every German knew about Coca-Cola. Through his aggressive marketing, Kett did something truly remarkable. He got a company with centuries of alcoholic traditions to actually start drinking soda instead. Of course, Kett's timing was impeccable. He built factories and hired people when everything was cheap because of the Great Depression. Then, when Germany started recovering in the early 1930s, Kett's Coca-Cola was the first product many people bought when they finally had some disposable income. Technology too was helping Kett. Refrigerators and swept across America in 1930s and were making their way to Germany too, allowing an unprecedented amount of people to enjoy a cold Coca-Cola. Of course, Kett was very careful in his advertising. He went to great lengths to hide the fact that Coca-Cola was actually an American business. He listed the German subsidiary in every single advert and even tried to obscure the ownership structure by claiming that the American company was not a shareholder, but only a lender, providing the secret formula and the money. In a way, Kett was right. His phenomenal success convinced his American supervisors to give him incredible independence, so much so that by 1935, he was producing 7 out of 9 secret ingredients to Coca-Cola in his own factory. By that point, Germany had already become Coca-Cola's biggest market outside of America. But Kett was only just getting started. The 1936 Olympics held in Berlin became a moment of triumph as much for Hitler as for Kett himself, as Germany won 33 gold medals, more than any other country. Kett's Coca-Cola banner flew throughout the event and he ended up selling over 1 million cases of Coca-Cola that year. And yet, despite this accomplishment, a new threat loomed about Kett's cola empire. Under Hitler's orders, the German economy was embarked upon 4-year plan towards rearmament and self-sufficiency, and that meant much fewer shipments of America. Kett had no choice but to expand production even further in 1938. He had 9 factories under construction, with 43 operational. When the Nazis annexed Austria in March of that year, Kett was quick to establish a subsidiary there 6 months later. And yet, this wave of expansion would be cut very short. For in September 1939, Hitler's troops marched in Poland and began the Second World War. Coca-Cola shipments from America were very limited and were stopped altogether when the US itself entered the war in 1941. As the director of an American-owned company, Kett was afraid that he might be imprisoned and his business nationalized, which is exactly what happened to the German subsidiaries of General Motors and IBM. The Nazi bureaucracy was eager to continue with the nationalization it had performed throughout the 1930s, and Kett was an easy target. His only solution was to join the bureaucracy himself. And luckily enough, he happened to be friends with the Nazi Minister of Justice, who appointed Kett to the office of enemy property. From this position, Kett was not only safe from Nazis, but he could also save the other European Coca-Cola companies too, as the German war machine swept across Europe. Kett would take over the Coca-Cola factories of France, the Netherlands, Belgium, and Norway. But of course, all the factories in the world would be useless if they didn't have anything to produce. And Cat had no more shipment coming from America. He rationed the two missing Coca-Cola ingredients as best he could, reserving his limited supply for use in Nazi hospitals. But even this rationing lasted only a few years. Cat had to either find a new product or go bankrupt. But with the German economy approaching total mobilization, the ingredients available to him were extremely scarce. Cat got his chemist to create a recipe from what he called the leftover of the leftovers, which included the apple fiber left from cider presses and whey, the watery substance that remains after milk has been curdled to make cheese, depending on what produce was coming from Italy. The recipe would also sometimes include grapes, lemons, and oranges, but even then the resulting cloudy, brownish liquid was far from tasty. In fact, it was not even used as a drink most of the time, but instead people were watering down their soups with it. Nevertheless, Cat finally had a product he could readily produce, and starting in 1940. The Coca-Cola factories of Europe were once again running a full capacity. To come up with a brand name for his new product, Cat instructed his salesman to use their imagination, or fantasy in German. That word became the code name of the product, and eventually it was shortened to just Fanta, and Cat ran with it. By the time Cat's supplies of Coca-Cola ran out entirely in 1943, he was selling 3 million cases of Fanta per year. But when the Eastern Front turning against Germany, the war was starting to take its toll. When the army began requisitioning Cat's trucks, he had to start bottling carbonated water in order to get his company on the list of business essential to the war effort. And yet from 1943 onward, the German Air Force was steadily obliterated, to the point where the Allies were bombing German cities daily with impunity. Every single one of Cat's factory was bombed at least once during the war, while his headquarters in the industrial city of Essen were completely leveled. By January 1945, the Nazi government was collapsing in on itself, and it was looking for traitors which it could blame. The Ministry of Justice was no longer safe for Cat. First, it ordered him to change his company's name to anything other than Coca-Cola. And then it summoned him to Berlin for questioning and to begin the process of nationalizing his company. By that point, Cat's friend was dead and he had been replaced. But in a streak of incredible luck, the very next week, the Allies bombed the Ministry of Justice, killing the new minister and practically saving Cat from certain death. For the next 3 months, he would continue bottling Fanta until the Americans found him in a partially destroyed factory in May 1945. His first telegraph to the American headquarters was to confirm that German subsidiary was still alive and to ask for help. But the Americans were way ahead of him. As the Allies liberated Europe, Coca-Cola engineers sent for the US were marching right behind them, rebuilding their factories and bottling Coca-Cola in Germany as early as April. In America, Cat was hailed as hero. Not only had he kept the company alive, he never officially became a member of the Nazi Party, keeping Coca-Cola away from the tent of fascism. For his efforts, Cat was made president of Coca-Cola Europe, and after a few years of careful planning, he released a proper version of Fanta worldwide in 1955. Since then, Fanta has become one of the Coca-Cola's best-selling beverages. But it all happened thanks to one man's audacity to make soda in the face of Nazi Germany.